Well, happy Easter, Restoration Church. So glad that you are tuning in to be a part of these gatherings with us, wherever you are here in San Diego, across our country, or around the world. Happy Easter. My name's Kurt. I'm one of the co-lead pastors here at Restoration Church, and we're so grateful that you chose to join us. And our hope is that for the next 20 minutes or so, as we look to the Word of God together, that you would be able to kind of block out any of the distractions as best as you possibly can, and really engage, because I believe there's a special message that the Lord wants to give to you. Our hope for you for these next few moments is that you would leave with an undeniable sense that the God of the universe loves you and is for you, and that actually is what Easter is all about. Many of us, I'm sure your family does as well as mine, we have all kinds of Easter traditions and outfits that we love to go shopping for, and Easter egg hunts we love to do, and family get-togethers and plenty of ham to eat, or whatever it is for you that you love to eat, whether that's a meal or just the Cadbury eggs. I'm with you. We have all these things that normally kind of define Easter for us, and none of us, even a few months ago, certainly I would not have guessed that we would be celebrating Easter 2020 this way, and yet here we are. That so much about our life and our world, our culture, our everyday normal has been upended, and it can be challenging, and it can even cause anxiety and fear and even frustration. And yet I think it's actually incredibly appropriate, as much as it has been difficult to pivot and to change, it's incredibly appropriate to talk about the Easter story in this context, because Easter in and of itself was the greatest upending of anyone's expectations that there ever has been. In fact, the Easter story really is the pinnacle moment in human history where God did the unexpected, where the thing that everybody thought was going to go according to plan did not go according to plan. And so as much as your life and my life has been changed and affected and impacted in ways that have been challenging and unexpected over these last few months, as we come to Easter and the Easter story in the scriptures together today, my hope is that our hearts would maybe be a little bit more open, a little bit more receptive to what God might want to say, what God might want to do in our life with this very familiar story. I don't know where you kind of would fall on the spiritual spectrum. I don't know if you would consider yourself a follower of Jesus, or if you're kind of one of those that just checks out, Easter and Christmas, whether someone invited you via social media or a text, or if you be honest, you're just bored and there's, you finished Netflix and this is the next best thing, right? Wherever you are, we are so glad that you're here. And like I said, I put some Easter-ish clothes on. You might still be in your nighttime pajamas, or if you have graduated to your daytime pajamas, high five. But we're in this together. And really, this story, whether you're a church person or not, whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, many of us are familiar with the story. We've heard it before. We've heard the narrative. We're somewhat aware of the characters. And yet for many of us, myself included at times, we can miss the majesty of why that story even exists, why this story of Easter matters. And the question I want to propose to us this morning to consider for just a few minutes together is that what if a couple thousand years ago in a garden far away, right? Sounds like a great story beginning, right? A couple thousand years ago in a garden far away, when the stone was rolled away from the tomb, what if when the stone was rolled away, that was heaven saying, I'm here to stay? As much as our world seems chaotic and crazy, and your life can be challenging, and mine is as well, what if the reality of Easter is so much more than a religious holiday or a time to dress up in pastels? What if that moment when the stone was rolled away was when heaven was shouting as clearly, as loudly as it possibly could, that it had come to take up residence, not only here on earth, but in your life as well? See, if Easter is really just a fairy tale or a holiday mixed in with all the rest, it really doesn't matter all that much, and it's a great moment to gather with family and do some fun things. But since we can't do that right now, what if for a moment we consider that this actually happened? That the story that everyone expected to go was that dead people stayed dead. That's what it's always been like. That's how it's always happened. All the evidence suggested that that was going to be the case. But as we read in the scriptures from multiple people who met Jesus after he had come back from the dead, who, if we're honest, really had nothing to gain by telling this story, it cost many of them their own life as well. What would change in our life? What would change in your story this Easter if Jesus really did come back from the dead? And a deeper question is why? Why did he come back from the dead? What did that matter? See, for many of us, we think about God and we have all kinds of different pictures in our mind. An old guy with a long beard up in heaven, reaching across like you've seen in old art. Maybe for you, your experience growing up and being a part of a church that maybe you've left has left you feeling like God can't be trusted or that God is out to get you. Maybe for some of you, based on the circumstances of your life, that if I had had the exact same experiences that you've had, I would probably believe the exact same thing that you believe, is that God doesn't exist. That God left when he was most needed. And perhaps even this moment in our society, you are asking that question that many of us are asking. Where is God? If God is real, why is this happening? And the story that leads up to Easter Sunday, that first Easter Sunday morning, was just like that, where everything had gone so horribly wrong from the followers of Jesus' perspective. The people that were around him, that followed him around for 3 years of their life, who thought he was the Son of God, all of a sudden see their friend, their leader, their teacher, the one that they had left careers for, given up family connections for. They see him get arrested and crucified and buried. This was not how they thought the story was going to end. And we see that as John, one of Jesus' best friends, in fact, the only one of his followers who stayed with them all the way through his final breath on the cross. Later, he's writing down all of these things that he had remembered and heard and seen from Jesus. And he tells us of the night before Jesus was going to be eventually tried and murdered and buried. He remembers back that he had had a meal with Jesus and some few close friends. And he remembered something that Jesus had done. And as he's reflecting back on this in John 13, verse 1, he says, Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and to return to the Father, to give up his life. And then John gives us his commentary. He says, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Having loved his own, he loved them to the end. John wants us to know, Jesus' best friend wants you and me to know that when Jesus went to the cross, it was actually all for love. See, for many of us, we can think about this story, we can read the history, and we can even kind of hear the religious teachings about it, and yet all that is fine and good, but if it doesn't move to a place where you understand and feel and receive the reality that Jesus went to the cross, Jesus came back to life, Jesus lived and died and resurrected because he loved you, if it never kind of connects in our hearts, we actually miss Easter. We actually miss the purpose and the full story of Easter. See, many of us, if you're like me, you've heard the story so much, or you've been around church, that you can actually have the attitude that the Roman centurion standing next to the cross, one who presided over the death of Jesus, that he had. One of Jesus' other followers, Peter, he told his apprentice, Mark, who wrote this down, and he recounts this story that there, as Peter was watching from afar, as Jesus is dying on the cross, and he writes this down, that when the Roman military officer who was standing there right in front of Jesus at the cross saw how Jesus had died, he said, there's no doubt that this man was the Son of God. So you can have that perspective. You can agree, from a posture of an onlooker, but yet I don't know if that Roman guard had his life changed. I don't know if that made a difference to him, but he agreed. And for many of us, my hope this morning is that whether you've agreed to that or not, that something would shift today because of why Jesus died. See, the reality is that you can make someone fear you. You can make them obey you out of fear. You can make someone fear you, but you can't make them love you. You can make someone fear you, but you can't make them love you. All you can do is keep loving them. See, we have to ask the question when it comes to the Easter story, that Jesus was killed on a cross and buried and tortured all along the way, and yet he comes back to life. And what does he do? What is he like when he comes back to life? See, I'm just gonna be honest. I know I'm a professional Christian and work for a church and all of that, but if I came to the planet and said, hey, I'm actually God. I'm going to give up heaven, and all my throne. I'm going to come and be, confined to a human body on the planet. I'm going to serve people. I'm going to feed the hungry. I'm going to heal the sick. I'm going to teach, in incredible ways, way better than I am right now. That's just going to make you have all this awe and reverence. And then at the final week of my life, I'm going to give myself to you. And instead of receiving me as your king and leader, you're going to turn me over to authorities for about $30. You're going to lead me out to the city. You're going to beat me within an inch of my life, make me carry my own instrument of execution outside to a hill, nail me to it, and then mock me as I breathe my last breath. And then I die. And if I come back to life, you better watch out. I'm just going to be honest. You got it coming. But that's not how Jesus responds. See, all of those things happen to him, and yet when he comes back to life, he has this incredible message of hope and love and forgiveness, not in spite of all that we've done, but precisely because that he was killed for me and for you. He says, in fact, the reason that all that had to happen was because of all of those things that are just in me, that are just in you, where we are selfish and we want our own way and we put ourselves before others. And many times all of those things can feel like they're really small, but if we're honest, they add up into a life that is not the life that any of us would want to choose for ourselves anyways. And God says, you're right. I've made you for so much more than that. And it's exactly because Jesus was killed. It's exactly because he died for all of those things that I do wrong, all of those things that you do wrong, that when he came back to life, there's actually a fresh start. There's actually a new beginning. There's actually hope and love that's available for you and for me. In fact, that same follower of Jesus that we mentioned earlier, John, who was Jesus' best friend, later in his life, rather than being killed for his message that Jesus was actually the Son of God, they just sent him off to die on a faraway island. And he is writing literal messages in a bottle to people that he loved and people that started to follow Jesus, to send them encouragement. And he tells them something that I think is a great reminder for us this Easter. All of the things that are happening in our world, all the things that are happening in your life, all the feelings that we have about whether we can trust God in moments like this with our life, he encourages us with this, reflecting back on his time with Jesus. He says, the beautiful message that you have heard right from the start is this, that we should walk in self-sacrificing love for one another. That when he boils down all that Jesus taught him, all that he remembers about his time walking around on the planet, seeing Jesus alive, learning from him, watching how he lived, this is how he sums it up, that we should live with this same attitude of him, of Jesus, of self-sacrificing love. And he says, but don't be shocked. Again, remember the context. He's sent off to die alone on an island. He says, but don't be shocked that you, brothers and sisters, don't experience love in this world. Don't be surprised. Right? He says, yet we can be assured that we have been translated from spiritual death into spiritual life. We have been transformed. We have been moved. Something has shifted in us when we love one another. He says it this way, that a loveless life actually is a life that remains spiritually dead. One translation says a loveless life isn't really life at all. And I think for many of us, when we think about Easter, if it's just a religious tradition, if it's just another holiday, that doesn't have a whole lot of transformative power. But if Easter really is the exclamation point of the fact that God, when he could have done nothing, did something, showed up himself, offered himself through the death and resurrection of Jesus, then you and I can actually see that act as an incredible act of love. See, John earlier, when he references the life of Jesus in perhaps the most famous verse ever written, that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believes in him doesn't have to be afraid of death, but actually has eternal life. He goes on to say that Jesus didn't come into the world to condemn the world. And yet, if we're honest, most of the time, many of us, that's what we have experienced here in this world, right? That even people that claim to love us can let us down. Even people that promise to love us can leave us. Even people that said they have our back can turn and betray us or leave us out to dry. And you've probably experienced something like that in your life. I know I have. And yet when it comes to the idea of love from God, he says, I'm actually willing to go all the way. I'm going all in. This is all for love. The Apostle Paul would write later to encourage some friends of his in the city of Corinth that he said, as you live your life, there's so many things that we can all get, caught up and worried about and stuck in. And even in our religious life, trying to do the right things or trying to live the right way. And it can just be exhausting, can we be honest? Which is why he says, actually, there's only 3 things that are going to remain. There's only 3 things that are going to outlast you. In a time like this in our world where there's so many things that feel uncertain, so many things that we had put our trust in, the economy, our job, right? Our kids going to school 5 days a week for a good chunk of the day, right? All these things that were our normal that we had kind of put our trust in, all of those things have come undone and shaken a little bit. And Paul says, actually, there's really only 3 things that are going to outlast you: faith, hope, and love. And when we're trying, to make our own life happen, trying to make something of ourselves, those are 3 things that when we're honest, when we get to the end of ourselves, those are the 3 things we crave. That regardless of where you are on this spiritual spectrum, this idea of faith, this assurance or something to cling to that tomorrow could be better than today, that's in you. That whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, this idea of hope, that there can be a brighter story, that it doesn't have to end poorly, is so important to the human soul. And of course, the idea of love, this thing that we all crave, the thing that all of us, if we're honest, every aspect of our life, if we were to really boil it down, is a search for love. That all of us crave to know that we are loved, not for what we do, but for who we are. And the Apostle Paul says there's really only 3 things that are going to outlast you: faith, hope, and love. And then he doubles down and says, and you know what? We all know this. The greatest of these, the most important of these, the primary thing is love. See, for many of you, if you were honest, you have been looking for love in all different places, but you've kept God out of it. And can I just offer a suggestion that if you look for love but never look to God, you will always be left wanting. Because as John promises, we're just not going to find the thing that really satisfies us in this world, because there's a part of your soul, there's a part of my soul that has been created and destined and designed to perfectly fit with the love that God has for you. The things that we need, the questions that we are asking, the places in our life that feel uncertain right now, that might not be all that God wants to answer for us. But the one question of where can I find a love that will never give up on me, that question Jesus answered. That question Jesus gave his life to answer. And that when he came back, he actually wanted to tell you and to tell me that it was all for love. It wasn't for power or prestige. It wasn't to start a new religion. It wasn't to prove to people that he could. And it certainly wasn't to come back to get back at you. It was to come get you for himself. And so perhaps this Easter is the day that you would actually receive that offer, that invitation, that gift. And say, God, if Easter is really all for love, if the reason that you came and lived and taught and died and came back to life was all for love, then I'm in. Then I'm in. See, the truth is that I hope you will grasp today, that I hope I grasp today, that every day that we actually believe this, it changes everything, is that Jesus died to love you to life. That Jesus gave himself up. He gave up his life. Jesus died to love you and me to life. And so this Easter, would we receive that gift? Would we receive the truth that Easter is all for love, all for you, all of him, all for love. And so I want to pray and invite you to pray a simple prayer with me if you want to make this Easter the moment that you say, I'm all in. It goes like this: Jesus, I'm all in. I want to be fully alive and forever free. That because of your love for me, I don't have to live a loveless life anymore. I want to love you and I want to love others. So if you prayed that prayer, and if that's what you desired in your heart, I want you to know that right now in this moment, Jesus has come and transformed your life. Everything about your past is forgiven. Every mistake, every regret is gone. And that this Easter, you have been raised to new life because of him. And we want to celebrate that with you. And so if you're watching along, you can put little comments in the chat, celebrate people, give them some praise hands emojis. But we would love for you to let us know that you made that decision. So while you're watching this, you can open an email browser and just type in hello@restorationchurchsd.com and just send us a quick email so that we can send you a gift and celebrate you and really walk with you along this journey. But we are so glad that you tuned in, and we want to actually continue to worship God, not just for what happened 2,000 years ago, but for what just happened in your life right now this Easter. We have a lot to celebrate. So I would encourage you, if you want to stand up, if you want to get ready to sing, we're going to sing another song that really celebrates what Jesus does, who he is, and what Easter is all about.